Hello, welcome to Stageworthy. I'm Phil Rickaby, the host and producer of this podcast. Stageworthy is Canada's theater podcast, and on Stageworthy, I talk to theater makers of all kinds, from directors to actors to playwrights, stage managers, producers. If they're making theater in Canada, I'm talking to them. Some of the people I talk to are household names, and the rest are people that I think you should really get to know. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment so I know you were here. Like this episode. And if you haven't already, make sure that you are subscribed. Hit the subscribe button and that bell icon so that whenever a new episode comes out, you'll get notified that a new episode is available. If you're listening to the audio only version, make sure that you're subscribed there. Go to your favorite podcast app, search for Stageworthy, and hit the follow button. And while you're there, if you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please consider leaving a rating and a review. Those ratings and reviews actually help new people to find the show. So if you could do that, that would be greatly appreciated. Speaking of greatly appreciated, I have a Patreon, and I will go into a little bit more detail about that at the end of the show before I tell you about who my guest is next week. But if you want to be one of the people who helps me to make this show, and the patrons who back me on Patreon certainly are the people who help me to make this show, I could not do it without them. Please go to patreon.com/stageworthy and become a patron. My guest this week is Bryn Kennedy. Bryn is a director, a producer, sometimes an actor, marketing person. Bryn wears many hats, and we are going to talk about a few of those on this episode, but primarily we are going to be talking about her role as director of Riot King's The Moors, and as a fan of Riot King, I was really excited to talk to Bryn about this production and about Riot King in general. So now, here is my conversation with Bryn Kennedy. Bryn Kennedy, thank you so much for joining me again. We were just saying before we started, you were on the podcast in May of 2019. We were just talking about the show that you were going to be doing. It wasn't YTA. You had another term for it. Age appropriate, I think. Was the
age accessible. I think is what we called it.
That's right. Age accessible theater as opposed to theater for young audiences.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. We were really curious about making something at the time that worked for everybody, and where often with TYA theater they talk about of course there's an adult audience because you have to bring your kids to the theater. Someone has to bring them to the theater, but we often talk about the adult audience as the secondary audience. So we were really curious about whether we could make something where both kids and adults could be the primary audience. So that was kind of where that was going.
I'm curious how that worked out, because we didn't have to have a chance to talk after.
I think it went well. We did have some kids and we did have a lot of adults, and it did feel like a lot of people were moved by it. Like, we did have kids in the audience who were loving it, who were, standing on their chairs and just responding actively to the show. And then we also had things like my 80-year-old grandfather who's, got a doctorate of philosophy, came to see it. And he got, I think, just as much out of it as the 8-year-olds. So I do think that we can all enjoy the same content if it's done correctly.
I think that the fact that, and I'm gonna nerd out for a second, the fact that a show like The Muppets can make a return, and The Muppets were always for children and adults. Like, kids could watch it, and kids could watch it, but it was for adults. Like, there were things in it that were absolutely not for kids, but they flew over the children's heads, and so it was something the adults could enjoy. And I think that we don't do enough of that in the theater.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. I think we underestimate what kids can handle in theater. I think we give them a lot of things like existing intellectual property. We stay in a lot of stories that we know work for kids already. And I would love it if we took more risks with what kids can handle. I think that they can handle new stories that are a little edgier.
Yeah. Those old stories become new. They were one-time news stories, right? So it's that a story has to start somewhere. But I think that we underestimate the parents, who are the ones who are buying the tickets. So we have to give the parents your kid will like this. They already know the story.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, how do we counteract it in the marketing for the adults who have to buy the tickets?
I mean, the whole question of marketing,
Yeah.
there's a lot to be said about that. And I do want to talk about that because
Yeah.
you have a lot of knowledge about marketing and things like that, where theater goes. But for now, let's start out by talking about the Moors, which you are directing, which is presented by Riot King. Tell me about the Moors.
The Moors is another crazy play. It's my favorite kind of play. It plays with the Victorian Gothic genre. So novels like Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre. So really works off of those tropes, but tries to find a way to bring them into the 21st century for a modern audience to make them kind of relevant and accessible today. And so the play is about, it takes place out on the moors of England, which are very beautiful and also very scary and dangerous. And in this big old, and the play takes place in this big old manor house out on the moors. And the play begins when a young governess arrives. She thinks she's been hired by the man of the house to look after a child. But when she arrives, the only people there are his spinster sisters and maybe several maids, or maybe it's only one maid. And also, they have a giant mastiff dog who seems to be in love with a bird. And so that is a world that Emily, our governess, is thrust into. And then she has to figure out how this world works. Who are these people and why is she here? And that's where the play begins. And for me, it speaks a lot to, I think the play is really trying to comment on isolation, on loneliness, on the community that we give up to access power and status, and the cost of giving up community in favor of those things. And so that's for me what makes this play feel so relevant and timely.
Well, I mean, in a way, I mean, we are living in a post-pandemic world, and we all gave up things, and that
Yeah.
changed us. How do you see the Moors as it relates to, like, you mentioned that it speaks to the modern time, like, how do you see that
Mhm.
specifically?
I think it's in like we have this sort of culture of individualism right now that I find really scary and really sad. And we can get very technical about it and analyze that it came from capitalism and pitting people against each other and relying on things like, oh, there's finite resources, having scarcity mindset. So it's me against you, and we can't possibly all survive, putting that kind of like business model brain on interpersonal relationships. And that's something that I find really horrifying and really scary, because community is sort of a central tenet to me in the way that I view the world and the way that I hope I interact with people as an artist. Community is so important. And I think we've lost the value of it. We've traded community away in favor of only one of us can do well, and who's it going to be, and so we're all against each other. And so I think that's really present in this play, and I hope that's sort of what audiences come away from it with, this exploration of what we lose when we isolate ourselves, and what we could gain in community.
I really like the idea of community because, again, theater is a form of community, right? We sit in a room together while a group
Mhm,
of actors, which makes it different from a movie, the actors
mhm,
are there and they are performing in the
mhm.
same room, and it's very
Yeah.
immediate and real, and we're all sort of breathing together. It's a great thing, and I think because we don't go to church anymore, and I'm a former church person, like, for a long, long time, and there are plenty of reasons not to go to church, but church was something that gave you, like, a community, people that you saw every
Mhm.
week, people that you
Yeah.
spoke to every week. It connected people, and in a
Mm.
way, theater can replace that by if, we can go to the theater and, like, be in community with our fellow audience goers.
Yeah. It's so funny that you say that, because I often do talk about community as theater as community. Oh my gosh, sorry. I often do talk about theater as similar to church, because and that sounds a little cheesy and like, oh, theater is my religion and all of that, but it's more about this, what you're speaking about, the fact that you gain a lot of the same things from church as you can from theater. And I think that I would be more like, I'm not particularly religious, but I think I would be more of a church goer if I didn't have theater, because theater gives us community. It gives us a shared set of values the same way that a lot of religions do. It gives us engagement with tradition. and a set of an etiquette and a kind of rules that sort of transcend time and place. And, we go to the theater, and sort of similarly to church, we all know where to sit and we know how to respond to what we're receiving. There's a lot of kind of the similar sort of ritualistic aspects of church. It also appear in theater. And I completely agree that I think the way that religion has kind of or access to religion, people are sort of less interested in religion now, and I think we lose something in that. It's not about one specific religion being better than another. I'm not particularly religious, but it's about having that community, having that shared set of values, and having that ritualistic time to be together is really powerful.
Yeah. I've had religious experiences in the theater. We've all
Mhm.
I've had those moments where just like
Yeah.
it feels like that same thing. But also the thing about being in the theater is that unlike a movie where we are separated from the performers by a screen, we are fully engaged in that space.
Mhm.
We can't look at
Yeah.
it. We cannot. I think that's why it becomes such a magical place, because we are forced to take in what's on the stage, and that's why it's more immediate and more real. We can't disengage from it in a way we can from a movie.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. There's something about theater. I mean, it's why we've been doing it for thousands of years, which I know is a bit of a cliche, like, oh, we've always been doing it, we always will do it. But I do think it's true. It's lasted for a reason, and there's something that is irreplaceable about gathering together and being caught in this moment together and unable to look away.
Yeah, for
Absolutely.
sure. And it's also interesting how, the death knell has been rung on about theater many times in its history.
Yes.
Movies were the end of theater, and then radio was the end of theater, and then
Yeah.
TV, and
Yeah.
so on and so on and so on, and yet it's still here, you know?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because a very smart person once said to me, "Yes, I'm sure that photography was also the death of painting, and yet we
Yes.
still paint."
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. About the Moors, we've talked about community. Is that what drew you to the play, or was it the work of
Mm.
Jen Silverman? Like what was it
Mm.
that made this something you wanted to direct?
Yeah, it's a good question because I don't know that I immediately saw those themes in it of isolation and community. I think it took me a little while to figure out why does this play matter to me, and to come to those conclusions. What I initially saw was, I mean, look, I'm a big history nerd, and so I'm a sucker for anything set in another time period. I love the Victorians because they are so weird, and so we often have this picture of people from other times as being like very proper, very etiquette based, very rigid in their rules and their way of interacting with each other. And I love when you kind of discover time periods where it's just so not that. Victorians were so weird. They're so modern in the way that they relate to each other because they're so weird. It's such strange pastimes and interests. And yes, it's a time of like repression, but that also created huge transgression and coming out in other ways. So I love the time period. I love that it's historical. And for me, the historical aspect is also not just that I love history, but I think I love history and I love theater for similar reasons, which is that they're both ways that I process the current world around me. I need that separation from what's going on currently. I need to kind of see it through another lens of another time period or story in sort of a parallel world. I need that distance so that I can fully understand something better. So I love a play that gives me that distance that kind of puts us in a different world. I often say that my work sort of lives in the past, the future, or the parallel. And for me, this play is both past and parallel, which makes me really excited about it because it's a historical world, but it's also kind of a weird world. It's a little off kilter, a little slanted. The rules, we are new rules that we kind of have to learn about time and space and how people function in this play. And so all of that's very exciting to me.
I mean, the Victorians, like you say, they're so interesting because I remember years ago doing A Doll's House, which is not specifically Victorian, but it's
Uh-huh.
close enough. And I
Uh-huh.
remember like looking at it being like, why this is so everybody's so polite. It's so this, everybody's so
Uh-huh.
buttoned up. And we had conversations about why do people do this? Everybody's so boring. And somebody said there's what they say and what they're feeling. Because
Mm.
like you said, there's all of these rules about behavior, and it's very repressed. But as soon as you repress
Mhm.
things, it bubbles under the surface and strange things start to
Absolutely.
yeah, it's so like all the emotions are heightened because you're not allowed to show them. And so eventually they come
Mhm.
out, and it becomes about like,
Mhm.
when is this going to come out? And then you
Yeah.
you layer onto that the English Moors, which
Yeah.
in English literature, the Moors are a haunted place. I could think of, not only Sherlock Holmes, but even like an American Werewolf in London starts in the Moor. It's like
Right.
all this is this place where the mists come and strange things happen. So
Yeah.
what an
Yeah.
exciting place to set a play.
Absolutely, absolutely. They have strange, beautiful, thorny flowers and also quicksand and also poisonous snake and also peat moss that perfectly preserves bodies if you die out there. Like, such a strange world. And yet people chose to live out there. It's where they had their country homes for relaxation. And so I love all the contrast that kind of world setup allows us to play in.
Yeah. I'm thinking about the fact that you have the people have their country homes or their country manors and more, and their neighbor is like the dirty farmer who's like, for us an unintelligible dialect, or it's just like,
Right.
and it's so like the neighbors and the upstairs downstairs, but like neighbors.
Mhm.
It's such
Yeah.
a fascinating thing. Now you actually alluded to your thesis of
Mm.
directing, which is making theater about other worlds, past, parallel, and future. You've directed plays in the past, so this one.
Mhm.
You've directed speculative fiction, so Jane,
Mhm. Yep.
and also historical drama because you did a play about Mary Stuart.
Mhm.
Is there a world you haven't visited yet that you are dying to explore?
That's a good question. I think maybe something that I haven't spent as much time in that I would love to explore more is some of the classics, is some of the stories that we know really well, but how do we kind of twist them in a new way? I think that's something that I'm really interested in, and it just hasn't quite come my way yet. I've sort of worked on them in smaller ways, like the Hamlet that I worked on as an assistant director at Stratford.
Mhm.
That's very classic, but that's the stuff that when I think about being a kid and seeing theater, that was the stuff that was sort of most exciting to me. Was I was like, oh, it's cabaret, but it's weird cabaret, and like those kinds of realizations of going like, oh, you can do that with cabaret. So, or you could take a story like Cyrano de Bergerac and do it in all these different ways. So, I think that's kind of like a parallel for me, that works as like a parallel world, or maybe it's sort of past and parallel, but I think I would love to play around in stories that we know and what's new that could be gleaned from them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I always think it's really interesting about the stories that we know. You mentioned Hamlet, and I was thinking also about Macbeth. I remember years ago, I was writing a post on Facebook, as you did back in the day, and I was talking about the end of Macbeth, and somebody was like, "Excuse me, I'm watching that right now. No spoilers." And I was like, "Hold on." And they weren't joking. This is a person who did not know the story as well as I did. And I think
Uh-huh.
sometimes those of us in theater assume everybody knows all the ins and outs of the stories the way we do. But
Mhm.
this is a person who maybe they looked at the play in high school and they forgot
Yeah.
everything.
Totally,
And
totally.
we can't
Yeah.
rob them of that. And I'm not saying like when we I've just knocked my microphone. When we explore a play in that way, we can't ignore the fact that we are also presenting it for an audience that also
Mhm.
needs the story points. Like
Mhm.
you can do anything with Shakespeare, for example,
Yeah.
but you can also be so high concept that you bump into the story and it doesn't work
Mhm.
anymore. There's
Absolutely.
fascinating little things.
Mhm.
Is there a play, a classic play that you feel like that's the one that's like secretly, or maybe not so secretly, because you're gonna tell me, that you kind of want to do?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I think I love the Shakespearean tragedies. I have to say, it's a little embarrassing, but I am like a tragedy girl at heart. I love comedy, and the Moors have a significant amount of comedy in it, but I think because theater was so much a part of like how I processed emotions as a kid or something, there's something about getting to live in the tragic worlds that is the most exciting to me. So, I do love a Hamlet. I do love a Macbeth. I do love like some of his bloodier stuff too, I kind of have like a secret love for. So I would love to kind of get to play around in some of those worlds because they are so free. Like there's so much that you can do with them. But as you say, story is still paramount. And that is still even when we're making those. So I'm not so big on just like oh, I'll just set it in a different time
Yeah.
period. I'm more interested in like in what does it actually say, no matter the time period,
Mm.
about that is universally true, and how does that relate to what we're going through as people today?
Yeah. Shakespeare was great at that, of, like, being able to, like, be so universal that we can take a play from the
Yeah.
1500s, do it now, and we can relate to it. The tragedies are also brilliant because he also knew what would keep an audience's attention. You can't just
Yeah.
hit them with tragedy over and over, and he'll
Yeah.
throw in, like, some brilliant comedy in there just to, like, spice it up, and he knows that, like, you can't sustain tragedy constantly,
Yeah.
and you need to break it up
Yeah.
with different things.
Yeah.
It's the stuff that we need to, like, sometimes remind ourselves, I think, about what makes audiences work.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a good story. I mean, that's the thing. We can't go, making a lot of theater these days, and it's a totally natural response to what we're going through, the social reckonings that we're going through. But I feel like we're making a lot of theater these days that is about like things that we should know or views of the world that we should have. And those are totally valid and important, and we should be hearing those views. But also we have to wrap it all up in a good story because we're not going to get new people out to the theater unless it is an enjoyable experience at the very core of it. And that enjoyment doesn't have to be candy coated. It doesn't have to be soft. It can be, I felt innately changed by that and it was enjoyable. And that's what I think is I'm hoping to do with theater at
Yeah.
all times.
Absolutely. I mean, I think sometimes in some of our theaters, there's the attitude of, like, "Come to the theater, it's good for you." Like, it's like taking your vitamins, instead of, like,
Exactly. I call it cough syrup
"Oh
theater.
my god," it's so correct because it's
Yeah.
like you're like, you should wanna go to the theater because you wanna go to the theater, not because it's good for
Yeah.
you. Like, it could
Yeah.
be good for you, but you have to
Yeah.
draw the audience in with something, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, which is why these plays where the kind of issue at the heart of it are a little disguised, I think are really interesting to me
Mm.
because it's like, how do we tell the really good story and bring out the themes? Like, can we trust that people are smart enough that they will pick up on it and they will have that experience if we just tell the really good story
Yeah.
rather than kind of overtly put our opinion forward for them or tell them what they should be thinking about this issue?
People don't exactly like being told what to think about an issue, It's like if you're telling people
Yeah.
what to think, they kind of bristle at it, but you can also, like,
Uh,
slant that under by giving them the good story.
yes.
Then you don't have to, like,
Move
hit
it.
them over the head with it.
Exactly. As somebody who did door-to-door political campaigning in the last provincial and federal election, I can tell you people do not like being told.
There you go. Absolutely. You know, Riot King, I'm a fan of theirs. I saw I think it was something last summer, last year, which was just brilliant. Or it was last year, 2 years ago. I don't know what time is anymore.
Couple, yeah,
Couple
couple
years
years
ago.
ago. I know.
What if,
Crazy. Yeah. Yeah.
what is it that excites you about working with Riot King?
Eh. Oh, so much, so much. I mean, the project started because Lindsay, who was in Suddenly last summer, came to me about a year ago. She sent me a voice note. She said, "I'm scheming and I want you to direct me in something. I don't know what, I don't know how, but I want it to happen." And I love Lindsay. We've known each other for a long time. Not very well because it's always sort of in passing, but she's so brilliant. She's so outgoing. And she's such a fierce talent. Like, she's so fearless as a performer. And so I said, "Absolutely, of course. I don't know what it is and I don't know how either, but let's find something." So we tossed some plays around back and forth and we ended up on the moors and we invited Brendan, who's the founder of Riot King, to just a kitchen table read with some friends to just try out the script. And Brendan loved it, which was really exciting and said, I think this is a Riot King project. And what I love about them is Brendan is sort of has built something that I think people recognize is really exciting, that the work that they're doing is exciting and, they've been awarded and recognized based on that, but it's also quite flexible, like, it allows for finding different work, like, I think the Moors is quite different than anything people have seen from Riot King, but also really aligns with what Brandon's trying to do, which is just, give indie artists in this city the most exciting vehicle possible to share with audiences who want to see theater that is in kind of immediate and like quick and dirty and gives you an experience and a close upness that you don't necessarily get at bigger theaters, a high quality close up experience. And so working with them has been really fun because it's sort of all in favor of that. And the three of them, because Riot King is now Brendan, Catherine Caspolacci, and Lindsay as well. And the three of them, their focus is also on, it's so on community, which is really on brand for this show, as we've talked about. But they're so supportive of the other indie artists in the city. They're so supportive of creating a strong indie community. They're really supportive of supporting other arts orgs. Like they did a fundraiser for this show, and they also fundraised for another arts org while we were at it. They do such incredible things to support maintaining a lively, vibrant Toronto even within their limited means and resources. And people who are accomplishing that much within limited means and resources are always interesting and exciting to me.
That kind of lives up to one of my favorite just theories about theater. It's not even mine. I borrowed it from an artist. Cameron Moore is a theater artist and was doing stuff at the Montreal Fringe like 10 years ago, more, and just reminded everybody there's audience enough for everyone. And so like I kind of operate with that. Like if people come to see your show, they'll come to see my show, your audience. Like we don't have to hide them. We can work together on all of these things, and nobody loses out because we all win. I think that's sort of like the Riot King way. Like if you're lifting other people up, then like everybody comes up with you. It's a great way to be.
Absolutely. A thriving indie theater community with support beyond just theater makers, but into regular audience goers, that benefits everybody. And I think the Riot King does a really amazing job of working hard for the benefit of all of us.
Yeah. Now, the Moors is being presented at the Theater Center's BMO incubator space, which is, I sometimes think of it as a modular space because it can be like whatever you need it to be. It could kind of be a proscenium. It can be a black box. It can be in the round. It can be so many things. And Riot King has a history of doing plays in interesting spaces. Like suddenly last summer was in like this garden greenhousey type venue. What is it about the incubator space that works and is perfect for this show?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because we looked at a lot of spaces when we were preparing for this show. It wasn't kind of an immediate choice. We considered site specific. We considered a bunch of different site specific venues. We looked at churches. We looked at some kind of community venues. We looked at things that were kind of more industrial. So we went a lot of different ways with it. And Brendan and I toured a lot of different venues. And then we went to the theater center, to the BMO incubator space. And believe it or not, and this is terrible, but I've actually never seen a show in there, which I don't even know how that's possible. But I actually hadn't. So I hadn't really been in there. And we walked in, and suddenly the show sort of appeared for me. I'd kind of been struggling with a staging problem, which is that for reasons that I won't reveal in the script, the show takes place in kind of several different locations, but always has to have the same set. It's baked right into the script. The set has to be the same for the whole show. But there's scenes inside the house, there's scenes outside the house, and there's also a bunch of scenes between two animals who are not humans in the house. They are outside the house being animals. There's a mastiff and a moorhen, and I never knew what to do with them. I was like, are they on the set where the humans are? Like, how do I accomplish all of these things in this one space? And then when we walked into the BMO incubator, I was like, oh, this is perfect because it has that sort of sunken middle. And so you can have the inside context of the house present all the time in the middle, but you also have that fantastic walkway all the way around that space where you can kind of find other places and have other characters doing other things. And so suddenly the play sort of came to life for me, and I sort of saw it all play out very suddenly. And so that was it. I was like, Brendan, I think it's gotta be this space. And Brendan agreed, and they had just done Red there, Riot King, in the previous year. And so I said, are you okay that it's gonna be the same space? Do you want to switch it up? How, like, how are you feeling sort of branding wise for Riot King? But the reality is that the space is going to be oriented completely different than it was that show. The set is completely different, and that space is so flexible. It does feel like a totally new space every time you see different shows in there. So I think it will be, it's a familiar space for audiences, but I hope also it's used in a totally new way.
Yeah. But I mean, like you said, it's been different every time I've gone to see something there. So I never think, I know how this is going to go, because you don't. I don't know if they're going to ignore that walkway. Are they going to use it? It's like
Yeah.
It's like always a surprise. So it's a great space
Yeah.
for that. Yeah.
Yeah, you could really do anything in there.
Yeah. Your website lists directing, acting, producing, facilitating, and marketing as distinct sections. How do you introduce yourself at parties?
I try not to get into it. Yeah, I try to talk more about what the other person does. Yeah, yeah, you know what? It's like the reality of this industry is you gotta do a lot of things. And I wrestled with that for a long time. I wrestled with like, can I be all these things? Can I be, an actor and a director? Does it make me worse at one to be the other? Because I think even though this industry requires wearing so many hats, I feel like it also in weird ways sort of subtly discourages and undermines that. Like, oh, well, if you're one thing, you can't possibly be that good at also being another thing. And so it took me a long time to kind of comfortably list all those things. Um, and at the same time, I would say I am all those things. And also though, I would say at my core, at my deepest sort of part of myself, the thing that I love the most is I am a director. And I think if you told me that I couldn't do that list of things anymore, I think the one that I would be most broken about would be directing.
Mm.
And so, and that was kind of, someone put it to me that way once, like, what would you be heartbroken if you never got to do again? And I was like, oh, it really is. It's the directing.
I think it's interesting because back in the olden days when I went to theater school, they basically told us you can only be an actor.
Right.
You know, like if you were like, yeah,
Yeah.
I can be, I like for me, I'm an actor. I want to be a writer too. They were like, no, 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 you can only be one. But that very quickly was not the case. Like
Okay.
that's not the way people make careers in the theater now. You have to,
Yeah.
most people, there's a few people who've managed to be one thing and that's the only thing.
Hmm.
But that's not
Yeah.
the average career now. And so you have to be many
Yeah.
things. Um,
Absolutely.
as you were coming to terms with like putting all of these things on your quote unquote resume, what was
Yeah.
that journey like to like
Mm.
accept like that, like, oh, I can put directing on here and I can put acting and I can put this. Like, how did those
Yeah.
things grow for you?
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting question. Some of it was out of interest and desire to grow in that way, and some of it was out of necessity. So I went to theater school as an actor. I did the 4 years of acting training. But at the same time, I started directing. I directed my first show in what was then called the Sears Drama Festival in high school. And so that was my first taste. And I sort of very brazenly did Night Mother, which is an insane choice for a teenager. But so I'd started directing already, decided I wanted to continue directing while I was acting in theater school. A huge reason why I started doing that was because I just was seeing such terrible roles for women. There was just nothing interesting for women to do in the shows that were being chosen. And so I was like, well, who gets to choose these shows? Look, the director. Well, then maybe I'll be the director and I'll choose the shows. And so it did sort of start from that place. And then the love kind of very quickly followed of like, oh, I really love getting to think about the whole world. And I was sort of constantly getting kind of noted for that as an actor, that I was like constantly trying to be like, but yeah, but I'm interested in my character, but I'm also interested in what that guy over there is doing. And can we talk about that? And so I think it was kind of a natural fit that I was like, I want to look at the whole world. I want to be interested in the whole world. And then I graduated from theater school and I had to find jobs and money. And so I was like, what can I do that pays my rent, but keeps me also in the industry and involved in theater in a more direct way? Because I'm just somebody who needs that. I need everything to sort of be feeding in the same direction. I can't have a sort of money job that takes me in a different direction. So that was how I started doing the marketing. I was like, this is sort of bad, but I don't actually have any marketing training. I just sort of started telling people that I knew how to market, and they believed me. And that was sort of how I got my first marketing job. And then the experience grew from there, as it did with the directing. I was like, oh, once I start doing it, I'll figure it out. And that's sort of been a big foundational tenet of my career, has been I can teach myself anything I need to know. I can learn anything I need to know. And so I never let not knowing how to do it stop me from trying. So that was kind of how I got into the marketing, and I call it I don't like the term side hustle or day job or Joe job. So I call it my complementary career, because feeds in the same direction. And I need both to survive. I wouldn't still get to be a theater artist if I hadn't found marketing and a way to support myself within the industry. Yeah.
I really want to talk about marketing, and I want to talk about the way that we bring people into the theater, specifically people who are not currently regular theater goers, because I think that's the big challenge that we have in theater. For years, I remember like 10, 15 years ago, we were having like sessions and like summits like that. Where is the audience going? Why aren't they coming to the theater? And we're still sort of having this same conversation. But I also think that sometimes we're like doing the same thing we were doing then, as far as like sometimes production, sometimes plays, sometimes like the way that we approach an audience. Like, what in your mind, what's the thing, or what are some of the things that theaters, when they're trying to reach out to an audience and bring them in, how do you talk to them about that process?
I mean, it's so hard. There's so many factors at play, I think, in why we don't have a strong, non-artist theater going community in Toronto. And I think Toronto sort of has its own issues separate from other places. I'm sure other places have their own challenges with that as well. But I mean, there's, the issues are like there's the cost prohibitiveness, there's the we seem to have a hard time striking a balance between theater that is sort of too highbrow, too intellectual, too hard to access, and then swinging. We go, okay, people don't like that, and we swing really far the other way towards like candy coated musical fun, and so it's like finding the middle ground in what are people actually interested in seeing. I think is something that theaters that we're still like figuring out is we know what artists are interested in seeing. Is it the same thing as what non-theater artist audiences want to see? Because I'm not 100% sure. I think we make the mistake of making theater a lot that makes sense to other artists, but doesn't necessarily make sense to audiences who don't spend a lot of time in the theater. And so that's something that I'm kind of thinking a lot about is why we program what we program. And then there's kind of the very like basic, simple stuff of like, are we communicating the story in the marketing? And I'm sort of always surprised by like how much that gets missed in the marketing is different ways to communicate story. And so I'm that's something that I was always trying to focus on with clients as a marketer. And I think one of the reasons why marketing was so interesting to me was because I was like, oh, it's telling a story, which is also directing. So I could approach it like a director and go, okay, how do we tell that story with different tools? And so that's a factor, and helping people even figure out that we're there, that we exist. I have so many family members who aren't regular theater goers who come up to me at like our once a year reunion and go, how do I know about what theater is happening? Like, where do I look for it? What do I do? And so too, I think finding out like where, like, how do we reach these people directly if they're not following us on Instagram, if they're not like our newsletter subscribers, how do we let these people know, the ones who kind of only know what Mirvish is doing? Where do we find them? How do they find out about Mirvish? Where do we find them? And how do we convince them that there's other theater that's worthwhile that they may not know about? They may not know the title, but they might find huge value in it. Yeah, so that's kind of
Those are huge questions. We, especially in indie theater, but even some of the mid-sized to smaller theaters, we don't have Mirvish money. So we can't put our poster on the side of a streetcar
absolutely
or a bus, or even in the subway. Sometimes like that stuff costs a lot of money. And so we have to find other ways to do it. And
for sure.
It's difficult to figure that out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not saying that I have the answers. I'm not saying that I'm perfect at all of this, but they are the things that keep me up at night about theater marketing.
100%. It's funny you were talking about, you have to be able to communicate the story. And it's a pet peeve of mine because a lot of times, every so often, somebody comes on this podcast and I start to ask them questions about the show, and they don't want to tell me anything. Like, they'll be like, I don't want to give anything away. And it's like, this is the premise of the show. You have to be able to tell me something. You have to. Yeah. I think in some ways we have to give up our snobbery about Hollywood and the way that they communicate stories. And like, because they'll have a trailer and you like, they might not tell you how the story ends, although sometimes they do. But they
get pretty close.
At least they give you like you're gonna like this. This is
Yeah.
up your alley.
Yeah.
You're gonna get this, you're gonna get this,
Absolutely.
and you're gonna like this. And we have to find a way to
Yeah.
do that too.
Yeah, they work really hard, I feel like, at imparting what it will feel like to watch the movie. And I think that's kind of the a secret ingredient is like what you watch a trailer and you get a little snippet of like, "Oh, I'm gonna feel like this, but for like 2 hours, and I wanna do that,"
Yeah.
you know?
But I mean, feeling the way that something makes you feel is a huge part of
Mhm.
what brings people to events. Now, people
Mhm.
want
Mhm.
experiences. They want
Yeah.
to have that. It's the uniqueness of it.
Yeah.
And we need to be able to communicate that to them for sure. Because,
Yeah.
if people listen, I say this like so often, like people will pay and we're paying money to go and see giant projections of Van Gogh paintings on walls
Mhm.
for $50.
Yeah.
See, most plays are by far better than that. Like, you'll feel something, like, you should
Yeah.
do it, like, but
Yeah.
we need to communicate what that feels like.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like, I think there's a lot of people because of the kind of theater that's sort of most commercially accessible. I think there's a lot of people who don't understand the way that you can be intrinsically changed by theater, and that that is the experience that you're chasing show after show, that that is why you go and see something where you don't know what the experience is gonna be, you don't know what the story is. You go in, hoping for the absolute best and finding out if you're gonna be changed by it because, like, I love musicals and so this is, like, no shade to musicals, but the biggest sort of most commercial ones that most people are exposed to, I don't know that they are gonna be intrinsically changed by, by some of those shows. And I also find it funny that, theater seems to be, like, the only genre where you see one show that isn't up your alley and you go, "Oh, I don't like theater." Whereas, like, we don't read one book or watch one movie that we don't like and then go, "Oh, I'm not a movie person."
Yeah, imagine saying, "I don't I saw a television show I didn't like once. I don't like
Yeah,
television." Like, it doesn't make any sense,
exactly.
and yet theater
Yeah.
people do that all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's also like helping the right people find the right kind of theater because, my partner when I met him, he's in film, he's not a theater person. When we met, I asked him, what shows have you seen? Like, do you like theater? And he was like, yeah, I've seen Jersey Boys on Broadway and I saw Phantom of the Opera, I think. And yeah, they're okay. I'm not sure how big I am on theater. And then I was like, okay, I think we can work with this. I think you like movies, you like stories, you like being changed by what you're seeing. I think we can work with it. And so I started taking him to the smaller stuff around town and it completely changed his perception of what theater was. And I was like, well, yeah, because you're going to the wrong kind of theater. You're not even a guy who likes like blockbuster Marvel movies. You're not gonna like, the shows that have been running on Broadway for 20 years. It's just not gonna be your theater. So, he saw like that crazy one-person show Buffoon at Tarragon with by Anil Sharani, which is so fantastic, such an incredible script, so far outside of, what you're gonna see in a commercial house. And he loved it. And so that's the other thing is, I think we have platforms that we're sort of misusing, things like reviews, where we could be, instead of using reviews to evaluate the so-called quality of a production or merit of a production, why are we not using reviews to help people understand, is this a production for you or not?
Mm.
Is this something that you would want to see or not? If you love, you know, jukebox musicals, this is the one for you. If you don't, here's something else.
Yeah. I think there are certain theaters that are using, like, the reviews as a shortcut, and
Mhm.
it's not even reviews of the production that they're putting on, it's, like, of the play,
Mhm. Mhm.
and but they don't tell me anything about the play. They're just, like, putting
Yeah.
like, the
Like
whole poster
Bachelor.
is, like, "Here's a guy in a chair, here's a bunch of
Yeah.
hook quotes from a bunch of plays,"
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I'm not telling you anything about the play.
Mhm.
Even a movie poster gives you a feeling about what that play is about.
Right. Right.
But we're like, "Here's a guy in a chair, come see the play."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's so funny that you say we can learn something from Hollywood because I think we can learn something from the way that they're able to distill down what something is about, Like, we don't really log line in theater, and I'd be curious to like, if we thought about theater more in that way, like, what happens if we distill this down to the most immediate story that it is and communicate that, you know? we tend to be a little, I think, and I'm so guilty of this as well, tend to be a little like, oh, but it's so complicated. You can't distill it down into one line, but you can, and it could be
It
useful.
can be useful to like give people a sense of like, am I interested in this? Right.
I mean,
I've seen log lines, but almost always for shows at fringe festivals. Right.
who are good at marketing
That's
because they
right.
have to be.
That's right. So you often will
Yeah.
like when you see a poster, there's a log line. I understand enough
Mhm.
about this show that I know that I want to see it.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
again, that's not often translating to theaters outside of that particular festival.
Right, right. Like it's not complicated enough, or it's not kind of high value enough or something. Even though that's all we need is a little taste of what's it gonna be like
Yeah. I mean, really,
to experience
you
this.
just need that
Mhm.
taste. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
the Moors is being presented at, like I said, at the BMO Incubator Space, which is a smaller
Mhm,
theater. We've
mhm,
directed on some small stages. You've directed on mid-sized stages. You've also
mhm.
assistant directed at the Stratford Festival. Do you have a favorite? Like, the
Yeah.
places that you've directed or
Mhm.
assistant directed, what's your fave?
Ooh, I don't know. It's so hard. They're all so different, and yeah, and they give the stories different things. But I will say, maybe I'll answer this more as an audience member almost than a director. But I love the Tom Patterson Theater, the new one. I know it's got its like technical problems, and people feel different ways about it. But I love the feeling of when you sit in that theater. It's so cozy. It's so it feels like the original kind of idea of theater being gathering around a hearth fire to tell stories. And I get that feeling when I sit in the audience of the Tom Pat. And it feels it's so amazing to have such a big theater where you're so close to the stage still. And you just get that feeling of we're all gonna be really close into something together.
There's something about that,
Yeah.
isn't there? Like, that's one of the things I like about
Mhm.
some of our smaller theaters in the city. Like,
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
audience and the actors are so close. And there's something like talk about not being able to like disconnect from it. They're right there. And
Yeah.
I haven't had the chance to be in the new Tom Patterson, but like
Mhm.
to hear that the audience and the actors can be that close,
Mhm.
is pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's literally only like 5 or 6 rows or something to the back of the house, like and because the stage is so long, they can still fit, a couple hundred people in there, but it's so immediate in its own way, and yeah, and I mean, I will always have a soft spot for the small indie spaces in our city. They are so special. They are where some of the most special, most vital work is happening, and there's nothing like, you know, being that close to an incredible performer. Like, one of my kind of party stories is being in like a two-row theater in London, England. And this was before Cynthia Erivo got famous. She was in a tiny little musical. I happened to want to see it because I like the composing team, and this show never gets done. And Cynthia Erivo was the star and was singing like 2 feet away from me the whole show from these cheap tickets I got offline. And there is nothing like that. There is nothing like seeing a performer at their absolute best 2 feet from you. I mean, what could be better?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Is this right? You were the program manager for musical stage company's One Song Glory?
I was. Yeah, I did that for a year last year, which was a beautiful experience.
First off, tell me about One Song Glory. I mean, aside from the song, which is from Rent, what is that program?
It's a really, really amazing program that Musical Stage Company runs for youth, sort of high school, late middle school to high school aged youth. And they get to it's free, it's completely free for them, which is amazing. It's so accessible. They audition for it. And then it's 4 weeks where they get to create their own musical based off of existing songs and songs that they write with the support of professional artists who come in as guests. And the exposure they get to working artists in Toronto is incredible, and the community also that it gives them with like-minded peers who, also know all the words to La Vie Boheme and wanna sing it with them on lunch, is unparalleled. It's the kind of thing, like, I absolutely would have killed for as a teen if I had known it existed, But it is such an incredible program. There's really nothing like being surrounded by theater kids doing what they love, and you just see they are just fearless in chasing what they're after, just so driven and passionate and smart. And so yeah, getting to manage the program was such a beautiful gift that sort of fell into my lap kind of accidentally, and it was exhausting because, teens need a lot from you, but also so energizing and such a good reminder of, how privileged we are to get to do what we do. That what we do is so special, that it means so much to people, and that we're so lucky to get to play in this world.
You mentioned that you love a musical, and you also alluded to, like, if this had existed when you were younger, like, you would have,
Mhm.
really, like, loved to do it. Did you learn
Mhm.
anything about this next generation of theater kids when you were doing it?
I learned how much they wanna take care of each other, which was really amazing to see. I think, they're really smart, and they're taking in everything that's going on in the world right now. All our conversations about identity and how we fit together, and, what identity is valid and what is not, and what opinions are valid and what is not. And it's such a hard world of, cutting people off and devaluing who people are. And it was just so beautiful to see this group of kids come together who just really wanted to take care of each other, who really wanted to, like, support each other in the work, validate who each other were. Like, just the way that they, I had a small fear going in that there would be like competitiveness or something, and that they were, or like a little bit of cutthroat, or, theater kid kind of stereotype stuff. And it was just so the opposite of that. When one of them would be asked to come up to sing in a workshop, and none of the other kids would get to sing, but this one kid was kinda use an example or something, the way that they would cheer for each other was just so amazing to see it. So it was just such a reminder of, again, it all comes back to community, and to the fact that there's room for everybody, and they were such beautiful examples of that.
That's so amazing, because I think that is something that exists but gets wrung out sometimes in theater school, sometimes in early career, when
Mhm.
it becomes easy to forget about,
Yeah,
how important it is to hold each other and lift each other up and that sort of thing.
absolutely.
And it's so good that they have that. And as I hear about some of the theater schools changing the way that they operate, I'm
Mhm.
hopeful that these kids, when they go through theater school, won't lose that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely, because, I think competitiveness was a key aspect of theater school when I went through it. And, that the idea of, like, only some of you will make it, and all of that. And so, yeah, I hope that this is something that they hang on to, and I have a feeling that it will be, just seeing how they were with each other. And yeah, I hope we can shift some of these things, these ways of thinking. I think, we have more options now. We know better. We know better, you do better, and I hope that we all start to do better on that.
I agree. I think we need to carry that lesson with us as we go forward and make
Mhm.
theater in the years to come. Like, we need each other,
Mhm.
right?
Yes,
And
yeah,
that's something
absolutely.
we can't give up on.
Mhm.
As we move to a close, I want to come back
Mhm.
to the moors for a second, and I want to ask you if anything has surprised you during this rehearsal process.
I mean, I think something that I sort of hoped for going in, but I wasn't 100% sure would happen, is the way that this play has kind of revealed itself over working on it in rehearsal. The text, I think, because it's written in sort of plain modern-ish language, it sort of feels quite overt and sort of simple in a way. And from that first kitchen table read, and from the work I was doing in advance on my own, I kind of had an inkling. I thought, I think there's a lot more to this, actually. And I was sort of starting to uncover some of those layers. But the more we have worked on it in rehearsal, the more I have been sort of surprised again and again by how much depth is actually written into this text, by how complicated the relationships are. I'm kind of bowled over by it every day. Every day we're finding something that makes me go, I never thought that existed in this play. And it's amazing to discover it. And so that has been really great, is just finding that this play contains such multitudes and far beyond what I like sort of hoped that it would. I hoped that it had some, but I didn't know that it had this many, I think is what has been surprising. And what has not been surprising but has been amazing is the way that our cast, despite our sort of, we have quite a short rehearsal process, and despite that, they've just fearlessly, dove in, and I asked them in the first couple of days to look for that depth, to find those multitudes, and they've just gone for it in every possible way.
Sounds incredibly exciting. So I'm looking forward to this play. This sounds like a lot of fun and something to look forward to. So, Bryn, thank you so much for
No,
talking with me about that.
thank you so much for having me on. It's so lovely to chat with you, and so nice to be back after several years. And lots happening, and just so fun to talk about theater. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for coming. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Stageworthy. I am going to tell you about next week's guest in just a second. But first, let me talk a little bit more in detail about Patreon. Because, like I said at the beginning of the show, I cannot make this show without the people who have chosen to back me on Patreon. Because even though a podcast like this is given to you for free, it costs money to make this. Some of the costs are, having a website, having a place to host the files so they can be distributed to all of the podcast distribution places, editing software, and transcripts for episodes are also something that I'm working on adding into the back catalog, and all of the future episodes will have transcripts, but that all costs money. And I don't have advertising and I don't have sponsors. So the only way that I am able to afford this is by having patrons. Prior to last year, when I started the Patreon, I paid for everything on Stageworthy out of my own pocket. And that gets expensive after a while, and I have loved doing it. Making Stageworthy and giving it to you is one of the joys of my life, but it does get expensive. And because there are no sponsors and no advertising, I do have to pay for that out of my own pocket. And even with the patrons that I have, we are covering the costs that I mentioned before, but only just. I'm not covering the time that it takes to do everything involved in making the podcast. So if you want to help me to make this podcast, please go to patreon.com/stageworthy and become a patron. Patrons get early access to episodes. We'll have conversations about things that are happening in the theater world and more. And of course, the more patrons who join the Patreon, the more I can offer to the patrons I have. If you want to help me to make this show, I would be so grateful. Go to patreon.com/stageworthy and become a patron. My guest next week is Logan Robbins, who is the artistic director of the Unnatural Disaster Theater Company. I really enjoyed that conversation, and you will too when you tune in to next week's episode of Stageworthy.